Indiana has way more hidden stories than most folks realize. Tucked away in forests, along cliffs, and through river valleys are secret chambers, weird carvings, abandoned villages, and quiet earthworks. These places whisper of cultures that disappeared long before anyone started writing things down. They make you want to take a closer look and imagine what stories might still be buried beneath Indiana's land, waiting to be uncovered. If you've ever wandered the shaded trails of Hemlock Cliffs, you already know this place feels different the moment you step into it. The temperature drops almost immediately, the hawa turns damp and cool, and the sandstone cliffs rise around you like quiet, watchful walls. Water seeps from ledges even in the middle of dry seasons, dripping steadily into moss and hajar below. The forest canopy filters the light into soft, shifting patterns, and the deeper you go, the more the outside world seems to fall away. It's not dramatic, it's subtle, but it changes how you move. You slow down, you look closer, you start noticing things you would normally miss, and eventually, if you're paying attention, you begin to see them. At first, they don't look like much. A faint line in the sandstone, a shallow groove that seems too straight, a small cluster of marks that don't quite match the surrounding rock. But once your eyes adjust, something shifts. What looked random begins to feel deliberate. What seemed like the tabi'i erosion starts to resemble intention. And that's where the mystery begins. The carvings at Hemlock Cliffs are easy to overlook. Many hikers pass right by them without ever realizing they're there. They're worn down by time, softened by centuries of weather, and scattered across ledges, alcoves, and shadowed recesses. But once you spot the first one, it's hard to stop. You start seeing more. Short lines etched into flat hedja surfaces, long grooves stretching across entire slabs, shapes that hint at patterns, circles, ladders, spirals, branching hoput. Some are only a few inches long. Others seem to have been made with patience and repetition, as if someone returned to the same spot again and again. And the question becomes unavoidable. Who made these and why? There's no simple answer. From a scientific perspective, part of the explanation is relatively straightforward. The sandstone in this region is relatively soft and highly susceptible to erosion. Wind, water, temperature shifts, and even plant roots can create lines and fractures that sometimes look intentional. So yes, some of what people interpret as carvings may actually be natural, but not all of it. Some marks cut too cleanly, some lines run too straight, some shapes repeat in ways that feel purposeful, and that's where interpretation takes over. Archaeologists acknowledge that indigenous peoples lived throughout this region for thousands of years. The surrounding area of Hoosier National Forest would have provided shelter, water, and access to game, making Hemlock Cliffs a natural stop point for travel, seasonal camps, or even small gatherings. It's not difficult to imagine people using the soft sandstone as a surface for marking something meaningful, symbols, tallies, or even simple expressions of presence. However, here's the important correction. There is no confirmed archaeological evidence that identifies these carvings as prehistoric Native American petroglyphs. In fact, unlike well-documented sites such as Petroglyphs Provincial Park or the carvings in the American Southwest, the marks at Hemlock Cliffs have not been formally studied, dated, or classified in any definitive way. That uncertainty opens the door to multiple possibilities. Some believe the carvings are ancient, perhaps remnants of symbolic systems tied to nature, seasons, or spiritual beliefs. A few shapes, like faint spirals or zigzag patterns, resemble motifs found in other parts of North America, though the similarities are far from conclusive. Others suggest a more recent origin. Early settlers and travelers passed through southern Indiana for generations. It was common for pioneers to carve initials, dates, or simple symbols into rock surfaces as they moved across the land. But here's where things get interesting. The Hemlock Cliffs carvings don't clearly resemble typical pioneer graffiti. There are no obvious names, No dates, no crosses, hearts, or familiar markings. Instead, the shapes feel more abstract, less like signatures, more like something tied to the place itself. And then there are the carvings that stand out. One of the most talked about shapes is a faint triangle with a vertical line running through its center. Depending on who you ask, it could be anything: an arrow pointing upward, a simplified human figure, or even a directional marker. What makes it intriguing isn't just the shape, it's the location. It sits tucked inside a recessed nook, partially protected from rain and erosion. That shelter may explain why it has survived more clearly than others. When you stand in front of it, it feels like it almost reveals something, like meaning is just within reach, but never quite fully visible. Another formation appears as a long horizontal groove with shorter lines branching off from it. To some, it resembles a primitive map, perhaps marking water routes or terrain features. To others, it's simply a natural fracture in the rock. And that's the tension that defines this place. Every mark exists somewhere between explanation and imagination. The physical experience of finding these carvings adds another layer to the mystery. You don't just stumble upon them in open view. You have to look, really look. You duck beneath overhangs, you step into narrow alcoves, you follow faint, unofficial paths along the cliff walls, and every time you lean in closer, you notice something new: a groove half hidden by moss, a line softened almost to invisibility, a shape that only appears when the light hits it at the right angle. Light plays a crucial role here. In the early morning, when the sun is still low, certain carvings suddenly emerge from the atjad as shadows deepen their khutut. Later in the day, those same marks can disappear completely under direct glare. It's almost as if the cliffs decide when to reveal their details. And maybe that's part of why the carvings feel so powerful, not because they're dramatic, but because they're subtle. They don't demand attention, they reward patience. Some hikers describe a shift in atmosphere once they begin noticing the carvings. The forest feels quieter, the gorge feels more enclosed. There's a heightened awareness, not of anything supernatural, but of presence, of time, of the idea that other people stood in this same place long before modern trails, long before park boundaries, long before the landscape was labeled and mapped. One of the more grounded theories suggests the carvings could represent a tally system, marks used to count days, seasons, hunts, or cycles. Some groups of lines appear evenly spaced, almost rhythmic, as if they were tracking something over time. It's a simple idea, but a plausible one. Still, without formal study, it remains speculation. Today, Hemlock Cliffs is a protected area, and carving into the rock is strictly prohibited. That protection helps preserve what remains, but it also means the mystery continues untouched. No plaques explain the markings, no official signs interpret them, no single theory defines them. And in a way, that feels right, because the carvings don't tell a complete story. They offer fragments, suggestions, echoes. If you ever find yourself standing in front of one, take a moment before you move on. Let your eyes adjust. Trace the lines, not physically, but visually, following their masird across the stone. Imagine the hands that might have made them, the time it took, the reason, whatever it was, that felt important enough to leave a mark. Because whether these carvings are ancient symbols, forgotten traveler marks, or something shaped partly by nature itself, they still do something remarkable. They connect you, quietly, almost invisibly, to the past, not with certainty, but with curiosity. And sometimes, that's even more powerful. If you wander deep enough into Brown County, far beyond the cozy cabins, art galleries, and weekend trails, you begin to notice a subtle shift. The hills rise a little steeper, the forest grows quieter, and the air itself feels older, heavier somehow. It's in these quieter pockets of woodland that something unusual begins to reveal itself, not all at once, but in fragments. A flat slab of stone leaning at an unnatural angle, a dark, low opening half buried beneath roots and leaves, a shape that doesn't quite belong. This is where the mystery of the Brown County stone chambers begins. Most visitors pass through the area without ever realizing they've walked within a few yards of one. There are no signs, no markers, no official trails leading to them, just small, carefully arranged stone structures tucked into hillsides or hidden beneath decades, sometimes centuries, of forest growth. At first glance, they might not seem remarkable, but the longer you look, the stranger they become. These chambers are typically built from stacked sandstone slabs, fitted together with a level of care that feels deliberate rather than improvised. The stones are often placed tightly, forming small enclosed spaces, some resembling miniature passage tombs. Their entrances dip low into the earth, forcing anyone curious enough to enter to crouch or crawl. And yet, they don't quite match anything familiar. They're not natural caves. The geology of Brown County doesn't form clean doorways or symmetrical chambers like these. But they also don't clearly resemble known pioneer structures either. Early settlers in Indiana tended to build with wood, not stone, and when they did use stone, their work was usually rough and practical. These chambers feel different, more intentional, more balanced. Almost like they were built with a purpose that wasn't purely functional. Step close to one and the experience becomes even more unsettling. Shine a light into the entrance and a slow breath of cool, still air drifts out. The scent is earthy, soil, stone, damp leaves, but there's something else beneath it, something closed off, undisturbed. Inside, the space is tight. There's no room to stand, barely enough to crouch, and perhaps most telling of all, there are no signs of habitation. No soot from fires, no tool marks, no storage niches. Just quiet stone walls holding their shape in silence. And that's where the real questions begin. If these weren't homes, and they weren't root cellars, often mistakenly called root cellars in folklore, then what were they? Some historians suggest they may have been short-term shelters built by early settlers moving through the region before it was fully developed. But there's a problem with that theory. There are almost no records describing such structures in this area, and their construction style doesn't align well with known frontier techniques. Others point to similarities with stone chambers found in the northeastern United States, particularly in places like New England. For years, many of those were labeled as colonial root cellars, but more recent research has cast doubt on that assumption. Some may have had ceremonial or astronomical purposes, though this remains controversial. That connection raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if the Brown County chambers are part of a larger, poorly understood pattern? Local theories, of course, are far more colorful. Some say a solitary hermit once lived in these hills, carving out stone retreats for meditation and isolation. Others claim American Civil War deserters used them as hidden shelters, avoiding patrols deep in the forest. There's even a theory that moonshiners used the chambers for fermentation, though the lack of ventilation and their small size make that unlikely. And then there are the more speculative ideas. A few hikers insist that certain chambers appear aligned with the sun, one allegedly facing the sunrise during the summer solstice. Others claim the walls follow cardinal directions with surprising precision. None of these observations have been formally verified, but they persist, passed quietly from one explorer to another. The truth is, no one has studied these structures thoroughly enough to reach a definitive conclusion. Many of them sit on private land. Others lie in protected areas where excavation is difficult or restricted. And because they lack obvious artifacts, no carvings, no tools, no dramatic features, they've been largely overlooked by mainstream archaeology. They're easy to dismiss. just small stone rooms in the woods, but their placement tells another story. Many are located in spots that feel deliberately chosen, halfway up slopes, near ravines, or deep in dense forest far from easy access. These are not convenient locations. Whoever built them wasn't thinking about practicality or daily use. It feels more like they were seeking something else: privacy, solitude, or perhaps a setting tied to a specific, now forgotten purpose. And then there's the atmosphere. Spend enough time near one of these chambers and you begin to notice subtle things: a shift in temperature, a strange stillness in the air. Some visitors describe faint echoes when they speak near the entrance, odd considering how small the spaces are. Others mention an uneasy feeling, as if they're being watched. Of course, there's no evidence of anything supernatural. The human mind is easily influenced by isolation, silence, and shadow. And the forests of Brown County have a way of amplifying those sensations, especially when the light begins to fade. Still, the feeling lingers. It's the same quiet weight you sense in abandoned places, old cemeteries, forgotten homesteads, where human presence has long since faded but hasn't completely disappeared. What makes these chambers even more intriguing is their durability. Despite years of erosion, fallen trees, and shifting earth, many remain intact. They haven't collapsed the way a simple pioneer structure likely would. They endure. And that endurance raises one final question: not just who built them, but why they were built to last. At this point, the truth remains out of reach. They might be early settler experiments in stone construction. They might be storage spaces for purposes we no longer recognize. They might belong to a forgotten group that passed through this region before its history was ever recorded. Or they could be part of a much older tradition, one that once stretched across regions but has since been erased by time, weather, and development. Whatever their origin, they leave behind just enough to provoke curiosity and just little enough to keep their secret. So if you ever find yourself hiking through Brown County and stumble across one of these hidden chambers, don't rush past it. Pause. Listen to the forest around you. Feel the cool air at the entrance. Notice how the stones seem to hold on to something. Not quite visible, but not entirely gone either. Because in a place now known for its art and quiet escapes, there are still corners of the land that remember something much older. And the chambers, silent, weathered, and patient, are still there, waiting for someone to stop and look twice. If you spend enough time around Eagle Creek Reservoir, the place your text refers to as Gist Reservoir, a name that doesn't appear in official records, you'll eventually hear the same story told in slightly different ways. It never comes from just one person. An angler mentions it in passing before sunrise. A local hiker brings it up halfway through a quiet trail. Someone older lowers their voice just a little, as if the story deserves that kind of respect. They all circle around the same idea, that somewhere beneath the water, there used to be something important, something shaped, something intentional. Most people call them the sacred circles. No one agrees on what they were. Standing at the shoreline today, it's almost impossible to believe anything ancient could be hiding below. The reservoir feels modern in every sense. Boats cutting across the surface in summer, joggers tracing the trails, families gathering along the banks. Everything about it is managed, maintained, and clearly part of contemporary life. But that surface hides a much older story. Long before the reservoir existed, this land was part of a wide, fertile valley. Streams fed into the larger White River system, creating a network that supported human life for thousands of years. Archaeologists have long confirmed that indigenous cultures lived throughout central Indiana, leaving behind traces of settlements, trade routes, and ceremonial spaces. And here's where the story becomes plausible. Across the Midwest, especially in regions tied to cultures like the Hopewell culture and the Adena culture, circular earthworks were not unusual. In fact, they were often highly sophisticated, carefully measured, deliberately aligned, and built for purposes that ranged from burial practices to ceremonies and even astronomical observation. Places like Newark earthworks and Circleville earthworks, now mostly lost, showed just how precise and meaningful these shapes could be. So the idea that circular formations once existed in a fertile Indiana river valley isn't far-fetched at all. What is uncertain is whether they were ever actually there beneath what is now Eagle Creek Reservoir. The story claims that during early surveys, sometimes said to be in the 1930s, though in reality Eagle Creek Reservoir was constructed in the 1960s, engineers or workers noticed circular formations in the earth. Some versions describe earthworks, others mention stone arcs beneath the soil. But here's the critical correction. There are no verified public records or archaeological reports confirming that such circles were documented before the reservoir was built. That absence doesn't disprove the story, but it does place it firmly in the realm of local legend rather than established archaeology. Still, the story persists because of what people claim to have seen later. During periods of unusually low water, especially in the late 20th century, some visitors reported noticing strange shapes on the lake bed exposed. Wide, shallow impressions, curves that seemed too smooth, too consistent to be random. One person described a ring of darker soil, as if something had once pressed evenly into the earth. Another compared what they saw to mound sites in southern Ohio, faint but suggestive. These sightings were always brief. The water returned, the mud shifted, the shapes disappeared again. Divers have added their own layer to the mystery, though their accounts are even harder to verify. Visibility in the reservoir is notoriously poor, silt clouds the water, and even strong lights can only cut through a few feet at best. According to scattered accounts, some divers claim to have felt or glimpsed large, flat, circular areas beneath the mud. Others speak of arcs or alignments that don't resemble farm debris or submerged structures from the modern era. But again, no clear footage, no confirmed surveys, no published findings, just impressions, fragments, moments that vanish as quickly as they appear. Skeptics offer a simpler explanation. They argue that these circles could be natural formations, patterns created by erosion, ancient water flow, or even glacial activity that shaped the land long before the reservoir existed. Nature, after all, can produce surprisingly regular forms under the right conditions. But those who knew the land before it was flooded often disagree. They insist the shapes were too clean, too round, too deliberate. And that difference in perception is where the mystery lives. Because what lies beneath reservoirs like this is already layered with history. When lakes are created, entire landscapes disappear. Fields, roads, foundations, sometimes even small communities. Indiana, like many states, has its share of submerged pasts. So it's not strange to imagine something older lying below. What is strange is the possibility that it wasn't just everyday life that was buried, but something ceremonial, something meaningful. Stand by the water in the evening when the wind dies down and the surface turns to glass, and it becomes easier to imagine, not in a dramatic or supernatural way, but in a quiet, reflective sense. You start to picture the valley as it once was: open land, tree lines, the slow movement of people who understood the rhythms of the seasons, who marked time not with clocks, but with shun and shadow. If circles ever stood there, whether earthworks, gathering places, or something else entirely, they would have been part of that rhythm. And now, if they existed at all, they rest beneath layers of silt and water, sealed away from easy discovery. There are no signs pointing to them, no plaques, no excavations, just stories. And maybe that's why they endure. Because the idea itself is compelling, that beneath a modern reservoir, beneath boat wakes and fishing lines, something older still waits, unseen, unconfirmed, but not entirely forgotten. So if you ever find yourself walking the quiet edges of Eagle Creek Reservoir, take a moment to look out across the water. not just at what's visible, but at what might be hidden below it. Because whether the sacred circles are real or imagined, they've already done something powerful. They've made people look twice at a place they thought they understood. And sometimes, that's where every mystery truly begins. If you travel to the western edge of Vincennes, not far from the slow, winding curves of the Wabash River, you might pass something that doesn't immediately demand your attention. Two gentle rises in the earth. Low, rounded, almost unremarkable at first glance. If you didn't know better, you'd assume they were natural hills, just part of the landscape blending into the valley. But locals have long called them the Twin Mounds. And once you stop and really look, they begin to feel intentional. They sit close together, almost like mirrors of each other. Not identical, but close enough to make you pause. And that's where the story begins. Unlike famous sites such as Angel Mounds, which have been extensively studied and documented, the Twin Mounds exist in a strange kind of historical silence. They appear in early settler accounts, brief mentions in journals, passing notes in travel descriptions, but never in detail. Settlers described them as even, paired, sometimes even unnatural. That language matters, because people don't usually describe natural hills that way. Even in the early days, long before roads and property lines shaped the land, these mounds were already recognized as landmarks. Travelers used them as reference points. They stood out, not because of their size, but because of their presence. And yet, no one ever fully investigated them. There are no confirmed archaeological excavations, no published studies, and no clearly dated artifacts tied directly to these specific mounds. That absence is important. It means that while the mounds strongly resemble human-made earthworks, their origin has never been scientifically confirmed. Still, their form raises questions. Stand between them and you notice the symmetry. Both rise to a similar height, both slope gently with rounded tops. Nature can create hills, but it rarely produces two side-by-side forms with such balanced proportions. That kind of pairing often suggests human design. Across the Ohio Valley and the broader Midwest, cultures like the Hopewell culture and earlier woodland traditions built earthen mounds for a variety of purposes: burial sites, ceremonial spaces, and sometimes as part of larger geometric complexes. Paired mounds are not unheard of. In some cases, they symbolize duality, life and death, earth and sky, sun and moon. In others, they marked lineage or status, possibly representing two important individuals or connected groups. So, it's reasonable to consider that the Twin Mounds near Vincennes could belong to that broader tradition. But here's the key point. Without excavation, that connection remains a hypothesis, not a confirmed fact. Local stories fill in the gaps where archaeology is silent. One long-standing idea is that the mounds served as observation points. Positioned near a rise overlooking the valley landscape, they would have offered a clear view of the surrounding landscape, especially before modern buildings and tree growth altered the sight lines. From the top, even today, you can feel it. The openness, the visibility, the sense that this place was chosen for a reason. Other stories lean towards ceremony. Some suggest the mounds were used together, two elevated spaces where rituals took place in parallel. This idea of duality appears in many indigenous belief systems, where balance between opposing forces is central. Two mounds, two positions, one shared meaning. There's also the more dramatic theory that they are burial mounds. In many parts of the Midwest, mounds were constructed to honor high-status individuals, leaders, spiritual figures, or important members of a community. Paired burial mounds could represent partnership, ancestry, or continuity between generations. It's a compelling idea, but again, no excavation means no confirmation. And that absence of disturbance may be the very reason the mounds still exist. Throughout Indiana, countless earthworks were damaged or destroyed during farming, construction, and expansion, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries. The fact that these mounds survived suggests one of two things. Either they were overlooked, or They were intentionally left alone.
Some historians quietly raise another possibility, that early settlers may have avoided disturbing them out of respect or even unease. There are scattered suggestions that local indigenous groups considered certain sites sacred, discouraging interference. There's no solid documentation to prove this in the case of the Twin Mounds, but the idea lingers. And then there are the more subtle observations. Some residents who grew up in the area recall that before modern development changed the landscape, the sun would rise in alignment with the space between the mounds at certain times of the year. If true, that could suggest intentional placement tied to solar events, something seen in other ancient earthworks across the region. But today, that alignment is difficult to verify. Trees, buildings, and tagayorat in the environment have altered the original hutut of site. So once again, we're left with a possibility, not a conclusion. What remains undeniable is the feeling of the place. Visit the mounds on a quiet morning when fog drifts up from the Wabash River and settles across the valley, and the scene becomes almost surreal. The mounds rise gently through the mist like islands floating in white. They don't dominate the landscape. They belong to it. Stand on top of one, and the elevation is subtle, but enough to create a sense of separation. The sounds of the modern world feel slightly more distant. The earth beneath your feet feels steady, undisturbed. And it's hard not to imagine what this place looked like long before Vincennes existed. No roads, no buildings, just forest, river, and sky. If the mounds were ceremonial, you could almost picture gatherings, fires flickering, voices rising, rituals unfolding under open air. If they were burial sites, you imagine something quieter, moments of ektaram, remembrance, continuity. There's one more detail that often goes unnoticed. From above, the two mounds sit close enough together that they resemble a pair, almost like two halves of a single idea. Some researchers have suggested that this could reflect symbolic duality, a concept deeply rooted in many indigenous traditions across North America. Balance, opposition, unity through contrast. It fits. But like everything else about the Twin Mounds, it remains unproven. And maybe that's part of their power, because once a site is fully excavated and explained, it becomes something else. Important, yes, but defined. The mystery fades, replaced by data and conclusions. The Twin Mounds exist in a different space. They are real, physical, and present, yet historically quiet. Known, but not understood. Visible, but not explained. Today, modern life has grown around them. Roads, homes, and businesses have filled in the surrounding land, but the mounds remain, protected, respected, and largely untouched. They sit at the edge of the present, holding on to something older. And as the sun sets over the Wabash River, casting long shadows that slowly stretch and merge across the ground, you might notice something subtle. For a brief moment, the two mounds seem to become one shape, one silhouette, one presence. And you realize that whatever their original purpose was, whether ceremonial, symbolic, or something we haven't yet imagined, they were built or formed to endure, quietly, patiently, waiting for a story that even now hasn't fully been told.